And I don't think our next speaker needs an introduction after those lovely words. Dominic, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Isles, Mr. Mayor, members of the panel. Dr. Isles, thank you for your generous comments about my father. I'm obviously biased, but I share, I think, your appreciation of what he tried to do as Canada's longest-serving Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, even though it was over 30 years ago when he left that office. I think that I learned from him the value of not only working with fishermen, and that's why the representatives of the fishers themselves, I think, spoke so eloquently about the importance of the relationship between scientists, between government officials who have not only the future of the environment and of the ecosystem at heart, but also a recognition that women and men earn their livelihoods and small rural communities depend on that work. And I appreciate very much, it's very moving that you referred to my father in such a generous way. When Sylvia invited me to come tonight, I said yes right away. I think this is an important gathering. I was joined today. I drove down this afternoon. I have a red face, not because I drank this afternoon. I have a little convertible car, and it was a beautiful New Brunswick day, and we got stuck on your great highway construction. And we baked, those of us that spend a lot of time on Route 11 were envious. But my friend Brian Gallant is with me tonight. Brian is a candidate for the New Brunswick Liberal leadership provincially. He came with me from Shediac to be with us this evening, and I wanted you to have a chance to meet Brian. And I'm also joined by a friend, Kelly Wilson, who was our candidate in the last election a year ago in this riding, and who I know shares all of your concern and my concern about this important issue. And Kelly, thank you for joining me as well. Mr. Harper is here. I was saying to Dominic Carty and to Janice, I see Mr. Harper every day in the House of Commons. It's a pretty good likeliness of Mr. Harper. The hair is very familiar, that plastic hair. I recognize that, but your mascot doesn't have as much makeup on as Mr. Harper does in the House of Commons. So next time you bring the mascot out, if you put more foundation on and some eyeshadow, Mr. Harper does, he's the only Prime Minister to show up at question period with makeup on. But it's too bad John Williamson isn't here. I don't know if he's in town. I drove down Water Street. I saw his election sign in his garage. The garage door was open, so somebody was home. But it's typical. I think, as Janice said, there is a climate of fear and loathing in the Harper government. The idea that you might go to a public meeting where people would express thoughtful, evidence-based concerns about a government decision, and you would try and either defend the indefensible, or heaven forfend, you might actually agree with the point that somebody made, would be very, very damaging to John Williamson's career ambitions. So he's probably hiding somewhere in St. Andrews this evening. But it's typical. He's not alone in doing that. Yvon Godin and I go on these Radio-Canada panels from the studio in Moncton quite often. Robert Gauguin, who's the Conservative MP for Moncton, Riverview, Dieppe, is supposed to be there. He's never shown up once yet. He confirms that he's going to go and then doesn't come. So it's very much part of a pattern. I had been asked, but Janice, I thought, did a great job in identifying some of the ideological cuts that the Harper Conservatives have made. Bill C-38, the budget bill, and one of the things I was most proud of as a parliamentarian was the work that the Liberal Party did with Elizabeth May in ensuring that Canadians understood this unprecedented budget legislation, 460-some pages, a budget bill that changes over 70 different pieces of legislation, most of which have absolutely nothing to do with budgetary or economic measures. And we worked with Elizabeth May in that marathon 24-hour voting in the House of Commons Some people thought it was a publicity stunt. I thought it was a useful way for Canadians to understand that these are very serious decisions that the Harper Conservatives are making and that they're hiding in the name of some great economic urgency. We've heard from some very distinguished scientists tonight. As I was sitting there, I said to Dominic Carty, you get one Dominic and then the next one. It's like Dumb and Dumber, right? I got to use the joke first, you see. If you'd done it alphabetically, Carty comes before LeBlanc, so he would have been able to. I was so bad in sciences and in math that I went to law school. And I even avoided tax law and courses like that where I might have to try and struggle with some science. But I do have a deep understanding, both from a personal perspective, as Dr. Isles said, when I grew up as my father's son, but I also have a deep understanding of the value of science excellence, of independent scientific evaluation and advice that's given to governments, and the importance of the relationship between government scientists, university scientists, and the industries and the public that I'm sure all of these people share a passion for serving. And what we've seen with Mr. Harper's budget legislation, but it's much broader than that, is, as I said, a real ideological attack. And some of the signs you have tonight are very accurate. This is not, Janice said it well, you can't say we have to control government spending by eliminating a library that has served a massive, massive use in protecting and enhancing an industry and a community as the library here has, and one on which we spent over $4 million in recent months. And the mayor was quite adamant that the work done there has made this a world-class facility. With the flick of a switch, you shut it down. You claim that the collection is going to go to Halifax, or as you said, Dr. Isles, if you give, I thought you're generous in saying that they'll move everything to Halifax. They'll try and bring it to Ottawa first, and if they can't, they'll send it to Halifax. I think what this says, if a government was serious about controlling its costs, it wouldn't spend $35 billion or more on stealth attack fighter jets that Canada's never going to use. It wouldn't spend $1 billion a year on advertising and consultants and public opinion research. It wouldn't have the largest cabinet in Canadian history. It wouldn't spend over $1 billion on a completely botched G20 and G8 weekend in Toronto that led. And as some of the scientists who spoke earlier said very well, that one thing that Canada needs to do is deepen our understanding of not only climate change, but human behavior and what it means for the ecosystem and on the environment on which we depend so much. And if Mr. Harper was serious about Arctic sovereignty, every summer, he hasn't gone on his trip yet, he's here tonight in St.Andrews, but he'll do his annual military tour of the Canadian Arctic. And I've thought for a long time, if you're serious about occupying our territory, and if you're serious about advancing Canada's sovereignty over this vast, vast part of our planet, you don't do it by buying naval icebreakers that the Navy in a candid moment will tell you they don't actually want to have. You do it by putting more scientists and more research stations and more students and more environmental and weather monitoring stations in the Canadian North. That's how you occupy our territory, and that's how you advance, in my view, the interests of Canadians in that region of the country. You don't do it simply by a military show every summer with the Prime Minister walking around on the deck of some naval ship. Janice referred to also, I won't go over that again because I know we're short of time, the habitat changes. The changes in the legislation, removing the obligation, and Mr. Ashfield has to be accountable for this. He can hide in Fredericton and pretend that he's just interested in controlling public spending. But the decision to remove and to weaken one of the strongest pieces of environmental legislation, the Fisheries Act, and the importance of the government having a legislated responsibility to work to ensure that the habitat is protected. And Bill Taylor's here from the Atlantic Salmon Federation. Many groups, not only commercial fishers, but many other groups, understand that importance. Well, when you say that, you know, some DFO official in Saskatchewan, and I've seen Keith Ashfield say this in the House of Commons, it's surreal. I feel sort of sorry for him. He gets up and he reads these ridiculous talking points that Mr. Harper's office gives him. And he keeps talking about farmers' ditches in Saskatchewan having somehow been attacked by DFO scientists. And he says that, and Ralph Goodale looks at us and sort of shrugs. And what this is really about is the government's ability to run a pipeline through a river. What this is about is one day we're going to have an oil or gas pipeline run through the Fraser River in British Columbia, or across some of the most sensitive environmental lands in the Canadian Rockies. So the cuts you're seeing in St. Andrews tonight are part of a much more coordinated ideological approach. You can't say you're interested in saving money when your spending priorities are some of those that I outlined a minute ago. You fire 5 world-class scientists doing absolutely phenomenal work, not only for Canadians and for the public service of Canada, but for the hundreds of women and men whose livelihoods depend on that work. These people have their jobs eliminated. You get rid of a library that we just built up at the cost of some considerable millions of dollars, and somehow you pretend you're actually doing that in the interest of public spending. It's a big lie. And I think that the turning point, and I hope that there are many, many other meetings like the one you've organized tonight. I hope the turning point when we look back on what I hope will be a change of heart with respect to the library, the science positions at the biological station here in St. Andrews, will be this meeting. Think about this. On the 18th of July, on a Wednesday night, you're over, Janice and I were trying to count, we're over 150 people here tonight to understand what it means to stand up for independent voices, to understand what it means to say, you know what, this is wrong, and communities as dynamic and as dedicated and as organized as St. Andrews and many other communities close to this world-class community will stand up and say, you know what, we're not going to accept that these wrong decisions continue. And I'm reassured. I had a lemonade before we came here with Alexander, who's sitting in the second row here, who's a grade 4 student at the Vincent Massey School here in St. Andrews. And that Alexander's here on a Wednesday night listening to one speech after the other. He's even pretending to be interested. I think says something very nice about your community. The fact that younger people are here and understand and can go back to school in September and say, you know what, I learned this summer what it means to stand up for independent scientific voices, what it means to stand up for the environment, what it means to stand up for a livelihood that has created economic prosperity for generations. I think that you're on a very, very good track. I'm very flattered you invited me. Et si jamais vous avez des questions en français ou des commentaires dans la période qui va suivre, évidemment, il me fera grand plaisir de répondre à vos questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. And